But I mean, isn't what we got is these Republican? Well, I hate to call them Republicans. If the true definition of the Republican Party is what it was and represents true conservatism, those are not Republicans that we just saw.
Right.
Aren't they lying at some point, lying under oath? And lying to the American people? I know we're getting so used to being lied to because of President Trump and this unbelievable fire hose of lies and cruelty that he spewed out of the office of the presidency onto the American people, that we have become completely desensitized. But Congressman Fallon, Gosar, and Clyde, these are corrupt, lying politicians who are marching lockstep behind a wannabe dictator who is not even in office. This is beyond sick. And I don't understand why there's no recourse. I mean, legally or in the political process, in the oversight process. How is there no recourse, Michael Steele?
Well, the recourse, Mika, is at the ballot box. It's the voters who sent them to Congress. I mean, I live in Maryland.
But if they're being lied to, Michael Steele, if voters are being lied to, Mika, and they're bringing in those lies from Fox and from Newsmax and from Donald Trump and his pathetic little website, I mean, these people are being misled.
They are. There's no doubt about that. But I can't unelect him. I'm not he doesn't represent me in his district. I don't live in his district. So it's the people in his district. It's the people who sent him to Washington, who send them there. That's part of this challenge. This is why what's happening at the ballot box and why the rules
Michael
are
Steele,
trying
the
to change
challenge
is so
being
important.
Michael, the challenge is being distorted by
Okay, so Mika,
Facebook,
what would you do?
Fox.
What would you do from New York or Florida? What would you do? What would you do to a representative from Texas? What would you do?
Well, first of all, I would be very concerned about the truth. If you were representative from Texas, I would stand by the truth and the Constitution. And quite frankly, I would put country over any of this. They are choosing not to. But then all of their lies, they're choosing to be corrupt liars and to follow this pathetic old man holding lounge acts at some place in Palm Beach where he has a band that's hired to support him. It's pathetic. It's pathetic the way they're acting. I can't change them, but I can support legislation that keeps places like Facebook from being sued for promulgating lies. It's this sick cycle that this country is like circling downward in. And I wonder why there's no recourse anywhere.
Well, the recourse is when you unelect them. That's where the recourse ultimately lies with the American people. And until you get to that ballot box moment, that's why you have to call it out. You have to expose it, like Liz Cheney and others have been trying to do, to say that this is not what we accept, nor will we stand for. So you bring that kind of pressure. You hope that the people in his district, in their districts, will agree with you and when the time comes, vote them out, or that you can summon enough support to move against that particular individual to move them out. So that's what this process is about. When you see them trying to change the ballot, the voting laws, you understand why, because they recognize at the end of the day, Republicans, like anybody else, recognize they're only there because there's a vote that's behind them. When that vote is taken away, they're no longer there. So let's change the rules. Let's make it harder. Let's make it more complicated and difficult. Let's put it under the guise of reform. But we know at the end of the day, it's about preservation. So that's where the fight is now. That's what the fight is moving into right now. And I agree with you. We have the concern, but we also have to recognize we can only do but so much at this point because we're not in an election cycle. We're not there yet. So we've got to make the case to those voters to get them to understand exactly why this is important for their districts and why it's even more important for the country.
Casey, to Michael's point, as we watched that disgraceful display in that hearing yesterday by those congressmen, Jody Hice, Paul Gosar, Pat Fallon, Andrew Clyde, Whether or not they know better, we can debate that, but they do know that that's what their voters want to hear, and that's where the rewards are, which is to support these conspiracy theories, if you want to call them that. Lies might be a better way to put it, that they were just tourists walking through the Capitol, moving in an orderly fashion, that they were just misfits, that they weren't Trump supporters. I think Officer Michael Fanone, D.C. Metro cop, might have a different view of things, as he was beaten within an inch of his life and pleaded with the attackers because he had 4 daughters that they spare his life, and ultimately they did, thank God. You were in the building that day. What is your read, though, of why not only these members of Congress are engaging in trutherism about January 6th in a public forum like that, but that Kevin McCarthy and the leadership of the party looks the other way?
Well, first of all, thank God for Officer Fanone and all of the others who stood with him that day, because he saved the lives of many people, and mine included, as far as I'm concerned. And they took this head on. You know, I can't explain it, Willie. It's the thing I've been trying to explain over and over again, because, you know, we spent 4 years covering the Trump administration, Republicans claiming that they hadn't read tweets or they hadn't seen what he had said, essentially running from cameras. You could explain it all away. You could at least understand the argument they were trying to make. Some of them would tell me, oh, I want to be the ballast in the ship of state. It's important that I be able to influence the president, etc. But being there on January 6th, their own house in Congress was quite literally attacked. And under any normal circumstances, one would assume that one would defend oneself's own house from attack. And there was a breaking point for many who were there on that day, including, at the time, Kevin McCarthy, who called the president, said, you got to take these people off our backs. These are your people. These are MAGA people. They are not Antifa. They are not anyone else. He said that to the president on the day. And he wasn't shy about telling reporters, his team wasn't shy about telling reporters, that this is how he handled it at the time. And then he has completely backtracked, because they have decided that it is easier for them to win if they do not challenge the voters that they have back home. And Michael Steele's right, and this is why this is such a problem, and it's also why what Liz Cheney is doing is so critical, because agree or disagree with her politics, I mean, she obviously has a completely different set of policy priorities from Nancy Pelosi or from Joe Biden, but she's so far one of the only people that's willing to say to these voters who are believing this stuff that they shouldn't, that here's the actual truth. And many of these other Republicans have looked that in the face and decided, well, OK, I'm going to try to reflect what my constituents want, what they think. But what leaders do is step up and say, no, this is how it is. And I do think that people are willing to follow real leaders. We have not seen anyone who has been able in the Republican Party to stand up and take on former President Trump. It didn't happen in the primary. We didn't see it happen throughout his term, and obviously not a lot of people are doing it here, even in the wake of January 6th. Liz Cheney's going to try it. We'll see if she can convince voters that she's got the right path.
You know, Donnie, this has been painted as a split in the Republican Party, but the truth is it's not really even a split. There's Liz Cheney, there's Adam Kinzinger, who we're going to talk to in just a minute live here. There's Mitt Romney, and there are a handful of others. And then there's everybody else who's going along for the ride on this lie.
It's incredible. You know, you look at those 3 congressmen, and there was another tweet from a congressman from North Carolina yesterday, Madison Cawthorn, that sums up what I'll call the sophistication of the Republican Party. It goes, na, 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 goodbye, Liz Cheney. I mean, that's where they are. What's so ridiculous about Republicans, what they should be doing right now is saying, hey, you know what? Look, there's long gas lines in this country. The jobs report sucked last week. We've got violence in the Middle East. We've got a hacked pipeline. We've got like they do have talking points, and they just can't get it. One other thought about the lie that they're talking about. I want to revisit how we talk about the big lie, because I don't think it's got enough teeth to it. The big lie sounds like it has 2 sides to it. It should be the failed attempt to overthrow American democracy. We need to keep saying that out loud, because the big lie sounds like a movie. It's too soft at this point. Stop calling it the big lie and say it for what it is. Failed attempt to overthrow American democracy. We've got to continue to put those words in the lexicon every day. But The Republicans, they're falling down. They can't get up.
So, Michael Steele, you know I wasn't arguing with you. I was agreeing with you, and that was just the... It's so frustrating, though, at this point, and frightening. I try and use my words carefully, but actually we are at that point where this is a frightening moment for the country to see so many people engaging in this behavior.
And I, along with a whole lot of folks out here, appreciate that frustration, that concern, because you do in a certain way feel helpless. You do feel somewhat, like, what do I do? That's why what Liz Cheney did is so important. It goes exactly to the last point Casey made. It's why they had to take her out. She was the symbol they could not afford to have the country see. She was in a position of authority and leadership inside that very same party that was pushing the failed attempt to overthrow the American government. And so when she spoke out against that consistently, she was giving voice to the concerns of citizens like yourself and myself and others. She became a light that people look at and go, what'd she say? What? And so you heard the resistance, you heard the immediate pushback, the threat that came from what she did. I mean, when she stood there at the bank of microphones after McCarthy had gone on, I'll never forget that moment, and they did this little presser, and he goes on and he's waxing on and on about Trump, and Liz Cheney, they asked Liz Cheney, and she was like, nah, he tried to overthrow the government. The stark contrast was what McCarthy couldn't take, because he was less of a leader than she was, and everybody saw it for exactly that reason.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.